From your drama-free true crime destination, this is Verdict Watch from Bethea'S Byte Reloaded. And a good Sunday afternoon, everybody. Early Sunday evening if you're on the East Coast, late Sunday afternoon on the West Coast. Welcome to Bethea'S Byte Reloaded. I'm Ernest Bethea, the last outlaw. So good to have you with me this evening. And this is the recap that I tried to pull off on yesterday. This is the last recap of Florida versus Tim Ferriter. And I say the last recap because a verdict had been reached and rendered. But as usual, which is why I apologize first of all for using the wrong video opening, Verdict Watch. But also I want to start off like I would the normal Bethea'S Byte Reloaded with a couple of missing persons updates for you. So let me go ahead and pull this up real quick. We got Jessica in the house. How you doing, girl? Good to see you. All right, give me just a split second. The young lady on the left side of your screen, and as you can see by the name on the missing persons poster, this is Carly Lane Gousset, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Carly Lane Gousset, who's been missing as of, if I can pull the other poster up, as of October 13th, 2018. Here's all the information we got here. At the time of her disappearance, Carly stood 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighed 110 pounds, with dark blonde hair and blue eyes. She's also has her left nostril pierced. Here's the breakdown. Carly Lane Gousset, then a 16-year-old female, was reported missing by her family on the morning of October 13, 2018. Carly was seen by her family at their residence in the White Mountain Estates area of Chiffon Valley in Mono County, California, during the pre-dawn hours of October 13th of 2018. At some time during the early morning, Carly left the family residence while likely wearing gray sweatpants or jeans, a white t-shirt, and Vans brand shoes. Carly left her personal belongings behind at the residence, including her mobile phone. She was last seen by witnesses walking south approximately 30 yards east of Highway 6 and 100 yards south of Sierra View Road on the morning of October 13, 2018. A thorough search of the area and subsequent investigation has been unsuccessful in locating Carly, and she has not been in contact with family or friends since she went missing. The Mono County Sheriff's Office and the FBI continue to seek information that will assist in locating Carly. She's part of the Things They Carry video series. You see this list here that I'm scrolling ever so slowly through. Now, here's the big portion. The FBI is offering a reward of up to $5,000 for a location that leads to the location of Carly Lane Gousset. If you have any information concerning the disappearance of Carly Lane Gousset, you are first encouraged not to hesitate. You're encouraged to contact the Mono County Sheriff's Office by emailing them at carlygoussettips@monosheriff.org or calling them at 760-932-5678. You may also want to contact the Sacramento office of the FBI at 916-746-7000, your local FBI office, or submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. All tips can remain anonymous, but whatever you do, don't hesitate if you have this information. As always, if you see something, please say something. All right. Cool. Jessica's doing okay. All right. Before I get started, first of all, I want to thank everybody who's been watching the replays of the recaps thus far. We are about to get into it so we can reach the halfway point. Yes, we are literally at the halfway point of Florida versus Ferriter. Now, I'm saying it halfway because remember, before the trial even got started against Tim, both Tim and Tracy were charged together under the same 3 counts. Aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and false imprisonment. It was Tim's idea to sever the cases. Just like it was his idea, which you'll see a little later, it was his idea not to testify. It was his idea to go ahead and roll the dice in trial instead of taking a nice sweetheart deal. When I say sweetheart deal, I'm talking about he could have been done with his time just like that. He was offered a deal of 2 years in prison and 5 years probation. Now, Tim's so smart, he decided he was going to go ahead and roll the dice. And now, as we begin with the last days of testimony, you're going to see that it has come up snake eyes. So, let me go ahead and begin with more of defense testimony with forensic psychologist. Stand by, ladies and gentlemen. About to get going on this. You're right, Jessica. Just like in the Dickens trial, he chose a bench trial in Gamble, and he's now doing life on all 3 counts. Yeah, and I also heard that that Henry Dickens is saying that he's blaming the system. Go figure that one. All right. Now, as I'm setting everything up here for this testimony, I need to go ahead and put this out here right now before I start on anything. Oh, no, I'm not trying to end this now. Okay, where are we at? Okay, first off, where is the... Okay, let's start with this. I gotta have a trigger warning up. If I don't pull this up, I'm doing you guys no good, because everything you've heard previously and everything you're about to hear now could be triggering to your mental health, could be triggering to your psyche. It could tick you off. Trust me, it ticked me off. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'm using footage courtesy of my good friends at Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Shout out to every last one of them: Julie Grant, Ted Rollins, Kelly Craft, Julia Janae, Judge Ashley Wilcott, Michael Ayala, Matt Johnson, Vinny Politan, all of you guys. You guys are just amazing with your coverage. So now, without any further ado, I'm gonna unmute this. We're gonna take you to defense testimony from that forensic psychologist, and we're gonna go and we're gonna see how she talks about this case.
To be kind of on our radar. So on the inhibit scale, he scored clinically elevated, meaning that it's very hard for him to be in control of himself, especially with peers in the classroom. He requires a lot of adult supervision. His self-monitor scale was also clinically elevated, meaning it's very hard for him to understand the effect that his behavior has on others. He doesn't really have any insight into how he presents to others and what he's doing to others with his behavior. He also had a clinically elevated score for emotional control, meaning when he is flooded with emotion, he can't moderate that. He is explosive with his emotion, whether it's rage or screaming or breaking things, whatever. It's very hard for him to manage emotions and especially anger. And just his regular emotional regulation index was very high. And, this is important to me, and it informs my opinion because we see when children have been traumatized, and normally very early childhood trauma will create a child that has huge problems with inhibition, emotional control, and they are completely unaware that, everything that's going on around them is because of them.
So you mentioned just now that this is about sort of what happens in early childhood. You also mentioned that these are tests of executive functioning. So let's start with this. When is executive functioning developed in a person?
Well, executive functioning is ongoing, right? So the brain is continuing to grow, and the brain might continue to grow into adulthood until the 20s or in the 30s in some case. So that's a dynamic process. Well, when we see things like in this testing, normally we can relate it back to children in early childhood because it's early childhood where we learn to manage our emotions, to not act out, to kind of be aware of how we are and what our peers think about us. And so that's a pivotal point where that part of the brain can be damaged, and then we can start to see testing like this.
Is it your opinion that
let me pop back in again just to let you know the next time you anytime you hear the audio go out on this, it's usually because of the mentioning the child by name or explicit language was being used during some point during the testimony.
opinion that those resulted from early childhood neglect?
Yes, that is my opinion.
Why is that your opinion?
I feel like that the early childhood neglect that we see in him from, being in a foreign orphanage and from the records that I reviewed from that orphanage show, not only did he have severe neglect and was malnourished, they were feeding the children sugar water in one of the records, and there was a very high infant to caretaker ratio, so that caretakers can't take care of all these babies that are in the orphanage, so they didn't get their needs met. He also had scabies on his body that were not treated medically. So this is a child that was severely neglected. We have no idea what happened to him the first 7 months of life before he was put on the orphanage door. We have no idea the neglect or the abuse. But I think that when you see that type of neglect, there is definite brain reaction from that. There's no way that you can have a child that is being neglected, and really, if you think about being ignored or the scabies, even medically neglected and abused, that would not have some kind of brain fallout because of that.
To state the obvious, is that prior to the Ferriters adopting him?
Yes.
When was this neuropsychological test conducted, if you have it on there?
I will look. October of 2022.
Is the fact that if it was after January 28th, 2022, change your opinion about the fact that
even 2 years before, we probably would have seen a very, very similar pattern. We probably would have even seen a similar pattern when he was younger, because we can tell through the records that this is impulse control, self-monitoring, emotional regulation. These were things he consistently had problems with across all settings.
Is there any evidence in the records that any of the physicians or psychiatrists or social workers that the Ferriters went to recommended a neuropsychological evaluation?
No, I never saw that recommendation.
I now want to talk about another opinion in this.
I do believe that his symptoms are an indicative of an attachment disorder.
Why?
So in order, first of all, I see reactive attachment disorder was diagnosed in the records for him, starting as early as I believe he was 7 or 8. I don't know that at 7 or 8 they had fully diagnosed it, but the therapist was telling the parents, hey, I think this is more than what I thought it was, and I think I think it might be reactive attachment disorder. And then it was more formally diagnosed by a psychiatrist a couple of years after that. So I not only see it in the records, but also in terms of the behaviors that we were seeing and through the records, point to a child that's having problems with attachment and pretty significant behaviors because of it.
So let me stop you there, because I want to understand what an attachment disorder is. So what's attachment?
Well, attachment is the most fundamental, basic thing that children need in order to be successful in life, in order to make friends, have intimate partners, being good at their job. Being able to attach to people means that you have stability, you have empathy because you can understand what someone else is feeling and not just yourself. It also helps you establish trust so that you can have a relationship where you can be independent and someone can trust you and you can trust them that they're going to meet your needs if you need it. When children early on don't get that, there's a whole disruption that happens that affects every part of their life, because we're social creatures, and if you're not able to trust people and navigate life socially, then there's a problem and it leads to what we call a disorder.
When is attachment developed in a person?
A lot of attachment issues have been looked at, of course, in my field, because it is such an important issue, and a lot of things hinge on your ability to attach in a healthy way. Normally, what we see is there's a cycle of attachment from the moment that child is born. So what we see in the cycle is a child that is born, and let's say that child is wet or soiled or hungry or cold. That child starts crying. Immediately an adult comes, a caretaker comes, picks up that child, takes care of that child, soothes that child. The child's then able to self-regulate, go back to sleep, or whatever they're doing. This cycle occurs thousands of times with parents. If you've ever had a newborn, it's constant. And if you're constantly going after that newborn every time they cry, soothing that newborn, helping that newborn then learns, I have someone I can trust. I have someone I can attach to, and I know that if I get out of control or I need something, there's an adult that's going to come along, and that adult is going to help me. Children that do not get this, there's an interruption in that attachment. So you can imagine all the things. They don't trust that anyone will ever take care of them. They don't trust that their needs will be met. They can't see the world from anyone else's perspective. So attachment is a huge ththing.
When we talk about attachment, I mean, what separates attachment disorder from a kid that's just like kind of awkward? Like, because it sounds like it's something that affects the personality, but is it just that you kind of end up being like uncomfortable or awkward, or are there other behaviors associated with having an attachment disorder?
When you have a disorder in general, so I'll talk in general first. When you have a disorder, a lot of people, you'll hear people say, oh my gosh, I've got bipolar, I'm so moody, or oh, that kid's got ADHD, he's so hyper. It's not just something that's at the level that we normally see in life. It's at a level that we think that it is clinically significant, and it's a disorder. It's disrupting their life. It's disrupting the lives of people around them. So just because the nature of the disorder means that this is something that's hugely problematic, and hugely problematic not just to the person that has it, but to the other people that are around that person. And in terms of attachment disorder in particular, what we normally see, so normally you'll get a child that has a reactive attachment disorder. They come out of a very bad environment. They go into a home that's loving and kind and has stability and structure. We normally see that the child begins to get better. So the attachment disorder gets better. There are children who have what we call persistent reactive attachment disorder, where the damage was so severe in childhood that as they get older, we don't necessarily see that damage start to go away. If they're plugged into the right therapies and they know the right places to go, and some of them, have to go to higher levels of care, then we might see some sort of healing, but it's something that they will struggle with, for some of these kids, for their life.
What behaviors are associated with reactive attachment disorder?
Objection. Relevance.
Overruled.
Go ahead. What behaviors are associated with reactive attachment disorder?
Not sure why the prosecution objected there. This is something they've owned, that the kid had reactive attachment disorder. All right, we got to hit a break, friends. Whose expert witness do you like better? Hit us up on social media. Let us know. We're going to hit the pause button so you won't miss any of this. We'll get you back in the courtroom live after this break.
And I'm gonna jump on this break as well. I'm like on Court TV's Julie Grant. Wonder why the prosecution had objected to asking the question of what details of a reactive detachment disorder. That's something we're gonna find out a little bit later on as we go through this recap. But I'm gonna go ahead, set up the next part of the testimony, and you're gonna hear a lot more objections. The ones where the defense attorney is going to ask a lot of inappropriate stuff, and not only is the prosecution going to catch it, but the judge will as well. So pay attention.
Florida courtroom where we're seeing the defense expert witness in the boy in a box trial.
Attachment disorder.
So when you look at, when we diagnose as psychologists, as psychiatrists, anyone in the mental health field, we have to use the diagnostic and statistical manual. So this tells us what signs and symptoms to look for and how to diagnose. So if you're going to look up reactive attachment disorder in the DSM, you're going to just find pretty much a general way of looking at symptoms. So it will be that the child cannot be soothed by their caretaker. The caretaker tries, when the child is out of control, to soothe them, and the child wants none of it and continues to tantrum. Or the child doesn't go to that caretaker for the caretaker to take care of them. Most children, when they get hurt, run to their parent. No, these children do not. They kind of keep the parent away. So there's kind of a general way of describing reactive attachment disorder when you see it in your practice. However, when you start to look at when people are studying this issue, what you will see is that there are certain behaviors that are kind of indicative of a kid that has reactive attachment disorder. And it would include lying, frequent lying for no good reason, just lies that make no sense. It can be aggression, it can be violence, it can be being mean to animals, being mean to younger children, stealing, hoarding. Food is a big issue for children with reactive attachment disorder. So they gorge on food or they steal food. They're constantly food preoccupied. Some of them don't eat. So it really just depends on, how that is manifesting in each individual child. But it's a significant psychological disorder when you see the symptoms involved of children whose reactive attachment disorder did not get better just because they were put in a loving home. Yeah, so there's multiple records that talk about the behaviors that the family was seeing and dealing with in the home, from psychiatrists, from a treatment provider in 2015, all the way up. All the way up to now, we see these behaviors. So it was pretty well documented that the behaviors that were being seen were indicative of a reactive attachment disorder. The lying, the stealing, especially the food issues, just almost everything. Cruelty to animals or being mean to animals. I'm not going to say cruel like horrible, but being mean to animals, being mean to younger, more vulnerable children. These types of things we do see in his history.
And does that predate, let's say, about May of 2018?
The very first record I saw where the family was really describing the behaviors that they were dealing with was 2015. So I believe he was 7 or 8 at that time.
You talked a little bit about gorging being common for children with attachment disorder. Can you sort of take us through what happens and why that happens?
Well, I think it's easy to understand. If you are starving as an infant and nobody is feeding you, then your brain has learned that you can be hungry and you're not going to get taken care of. You're not going to get fed. So it becomes a preoccupation with food, a preoccupation on how do I get food, and when I do get food, I want to eat every single thing that I can eat immediately. Or I'm going to hoard food. I'm going to hide food in my room. I'm going to hide food in my backpack so that I'll always have food. It's really very sad because it really is from a brain that was so deprived of basic needs. And now even, into childhood, they're still struggling with that kind of stuff. Having any kind of breaks on food when he does get a hold of something sweet, to the point of even stealing food.
Is that sort of gorging of food and hoarding of food, is that healthy for a child? Should a parent allow that to continue to happen?
No, you wouldn't allow a child to gorge on food.
Is there any indication in the record that the Ferriters were educated by a psychiatrist or a medical professional about how to handle this gorging issue in a meaningful way?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Sustain. You can rephrase, Ms. Marone.
Sure. Do you have any opinion, and we'll talk about this more in detail, as to whether the Ferriters acted with malice?
Do I have an opinion? Yes.
Okay, what's that opinion?
I do not think that they were maliciously trying to harm their child and make things worse.
I want to talk about that in more detail in a little bit, but as it relates to the food, why do you think that?
Well, I don't understand.
Sure. So I want to talk about your opinion regarding them not having malice and what they that they were not acting maliciously.
Oh, okay. So I think that not only in Ronan's deposition, but also in having sugary snacks. They mentioned the snacks that she allowed them to have. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but it was stuff like granola and yogurt and bananas and things like that. The sister testified and her...
Sustained.
Without So I guess not speaking about your beliefs, but what the records actually show, what efforts were made by the Ferriters that makes you believe that it was not malicious?
Objection as to your saying.
Overruled, but the witness is instructed not to relate what anyone said to you, just what you reviewed and what drives your opinion.
According to the records, a pediatrician told mom not to give...
Sustained.
Do you have any belief, is it your opinion that the Ferriters
Overruled as to that. You can answer, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. How are children with attachment perceived by adults who are not their parents?
That's a good question.
Can you restate that question again?
Sure. How are children with attachment perceived by adults who are not their parents?
Sustained.
Can we approach on this, Judge?
Can.
How could she possibly answer that question? That calls for speculation. That is the basis of that objection. It should be sustained. This is a mess, in my opinion. I want to bring in my guest watching along. She is a retired police sergeant with the Nashville Police Department. Melissa Pinkleton has lots of experience handling child abuse cases. And Sergeant, you've been through a lot of trials too. And looking at the advocacy, I am just like, my head is spinning. I want more organization from my witness. How about you?
Yeah, this witness is a disaster, and I don't know if it's her lack of experience testifying, but everything that she's trying to answer, it seems like they didn't prep her well, or she is not experienced in testifying, and it's not coming across well at all. It's coming across very unorganized, very PC, very blotchy, and it's not good for the defense at all. And I noticed the defendant's facial expressions in some of this, because you have it squared up that way. You know, you could tell he's getting frustrated by it too. You could tell him pursing his lips several times. That he's getting, but the objections, you know, I understand I'm not an attorney, but even I know enough that, nope, that's speculation. Nope, that's hearsay, speculation. And the prosecution is nailing all of it. They're calling every single one of the objections right. And the judge is on point too. So yeah, I don't know how they're going to pull this together. I mean, they need to just take a break, regroup, and try and salvage this testimony. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do it.
And I'm jumping right back in to agree with this guest that's on with Julie Grant. And you talk about an expert in this field, yet every time she opened her mouth in the last 5 or so minutes, it's either speculation or hearsay. And if I'm a prosecuting attorney, which by the way, I want to go on record, I have no legal background to me. Thank you very much. But if I hear hearsay this or speculation that, and I'm a prosecuting attorney watching and listening to a defense expert testimony, you best believe I'm gonna object. I mean, to say that this witness is a disaster for the defense, that's an understatement. I'm just saying.
Excellent point, Sergeant. Excellent point. And they should actually ask for a break. And really, the lawyer, I blame the lawyer, because when you ask a bad question like that, you're just inviting the other side to object. You have attorneys on the ball like these prosecutors in Palm Beach County, Florida are, as you said, Sergeant. They're going to stand up, take that opportunity to object. Now they're at sidebar again. The jury's got to be frustrated with all these breaks. It's like the witness can't even get through the testimony because the questions are choppy, poorly phrased, disorganized. Oh my goodness. So, okay, here's what we're going to do. They're still at the sidebar. We're going to squeeze in our break while they're there. Sergeant Pickleton's going to stay with me. Please do the same. We'll be right back with the boy in a box trial after this. I've worked hard.
Only on Court TV.
Thanks for being with us here on Court TV Live. Let's go back into the courtroom now. We're watching the boy in a box trial in Palm Beach County, Florida. The defense expert witness on the stand. Lots of objections because of improper questions. Let's go back in together now.
With reactive attachment disorder, is manipulation by the child who is diagnosed, is that common?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain that to us?
Yes. So these are children that want control over their environments. They don't trust adults. They are, looking for ways not only to seek attention, but also to manipulate, to get their needs met. They feel like they have to manipulate to get their needs met, and rather than being direct about it because their needs were never met directly. Yes.
Explain that to us without getting into anything prior to his age of about 9 or 10.
Okay. Are you asking me what in
behaviors
general,
did
what
Ronan
happened
exhibit?
before 9 and 10?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Dr. Rappa, can you pull the mic a little closer to you?
sorry.
So you're picked up better. All right, thank
got
you.
it.
No, I'm sorry. I'm asking you to talk about specific behaviors in the record that have led you to that opinion without getting into the specifics of anything prior to the age of 8 or 9. Sorry, 9 or 10.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem.
At one point,
I'm going to sustain the objection. You can restate the question, and we'll hear the answer again.
Is there, and on what basis, Your Honor?
I'm sorry?
Sustained? On what basis is it sustained?
Her opinion as to whether he's interesting or not is not relevant to the case.
Okay, without saying that he's interesting, could you explain what behaviors you reviewed in the record that are helping inform your opinion?
okay. So in the record, there were
Overruled. You can state what you reviewed, ma'am, and how it informed your opinion, but you cannot go into detail about what specifically was said because that's hearsay. So you have to be able to answer the question posed by your attorney without disclosing specifically what was said by someone outside of this courtroom.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Do you understand that instruction?
I think.
All right, well, we'll see if you can follow.
See if I don't.
All right, go ahead.
So what records did you review that indicated that?
School records, also records of when he would go to the doctor or saw the psychologist or psychiatrist.
Did you have an opportunity indicative of attachment disorder?
I mean, I don't know that you would look at him and you would say that the way you present is, an attachment disorder. But the things that I noticed in the deposition or that were kind of flags for me as a psychologist, he is very kind of detached from what he talks about. He can talk about it in an intellectual way, but he doesn't necessarily talk about it in an emotional way. So he kind of gives you facts without necessarily having that emotional congruence with the facts. One of the
I'm pausing here because if you've been paying attention, you heard a lot of objections regarding hearsay evidence. I just pulled up the legal definition of hearsay, which is an out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of whatever it asserts, which is then offered in evidence to prove the truth of the matter. The problem with hearsay is that when the person being quoted is not present, it becomes impossible to establish credibility. So, if the witness on the stand at the moment is going to quote somebody where they got their evidence and their information from, and that person isn't there to back it up, it's hearsay, which is impossible. Which that means they're going to have a problem. They're going to have a problem bringing it to credibility, which is why the prosecution is usually objecting on that. The next break you'll probably catch from me on a different definition is speculation.
Things that is interesting to me is that during the deposition, he was pretty blunt affect. He doesn't have a whole lot of affect on his face, whether it's, joy or anger or anything, it's kind of blunted. However, during times where he would talk about things that he had done, such as giving beer to his younger brother, and to see the effects of alcohol on young children, he started giggling. Or he would laugh when he would talk about that he went into his sister's classroom.
Overruled. You can only say what his observations were and his response, but not what he said specifically. So overruled.
Go ahead, Dr. Rappa.
So he would laugh at inappropriate things that he had done. But other than that type of laughter, he was pretty blunted in terms of his affect.
Why? I think you called it congruence. What do you mean by congruence?
It's really important when we're communicating with people that we are congruent. So what we're feeling is what we're showing to that person. If you're feeling something and not necessarily showing it, then people can kind of pick up that you're incongruent, something is going on with you, and it leads to lack of trust. So it's important. Congruence is important. It's also important because it makes somebody predictable, so that if you say something to me and I know that you are someone who what you say is exactly what you feel, then I can trust you and I can predict your behavior towards me. When people are not congruent, you can't necessarily predict their behavior towards you, because what they're saying and what they're actually feeling are two different things. So the congruence is a huge issue in relationships.
Why is that concerning for children in particular? That lack of congruence.
A lack of congruence in children, one of the things that an adult role is to teach children to be congruent, to teach children what you're feeling is what you need to be speaking, in a respectful way, but you need to speak your feelings. If they don't have that, then the child is an unpredictable child, because the child can compare it back to you what they know you want to hear, but they're not necessarily changing anything internally.
What is the treatment for an attachment disorder? What are the treatments?
There are treatments for attachment disorder. There are also some treatments for attachment disorder that are very, off the cuff and not good treatments, and nobody really, and professionals would recommend them. But the treatment right now for attachment disorder, most people would treat it as a trauma-based disorder, and they would do trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy or regular cognitive behavioral therapy. There's dialectical therapy. There's certain therapies that are known to work with children that have attachment issues.
Were any of those ever recommended to the Ferriters?
Objection as to hearsay.
Sustained.
Is it your opinion that the Ferriters were... Do you have an opinion as to whether the Ferriters acted with malice when it comes to the treatment of attachment disorder?
Yes.
Okay, what is that?
Laura, can you approach for a second?
Oh my God.
And here we go again. Another objection, another sidebar. Is it just me, or is this the fact that the defense attorney and this witness don't know what they're doing? Anyway, as I promised, the legal definition for speculation: when a witness offers their opinion or makes educated guesses about what transpired. Bottom line, whenever you hear speculation objection, it's usually not allowed, and depending on what side of the objection you're on, that objection will likely be sustained by the judge or overruled by the judge. Again, that depends on what side of the argument you're on.
Gosh, even the judge caught that was an inappropriate, impermissible question. She could ask the question about whether or not you have an opinion that the child was abused or falsely imprisoned. She can ask those questions, but not if they acted with malice. Like, that's terrible phrasing. She's not going to know what the intent is. Even the judge did that objection. You know, they call it sua sponte. You know, the judge makes the objection. That is that terrible. This lawyer's got to really get on the ball here with the questions here. We're going to have sidebar after sidebar and no answers. I'm being told it's over. I'm sure he told counsel to move on. Let's watch.
The court is reconsidering its prior ruling on the question of whether there were any recommended treatments. Ms. Murad, you can ask the witness that question with respect to her review of the records that she had presented to her in this matter. But, ma'am, just so you know, you're only able to answer that question with respect to the records you reviewed. You're not allowed to get into that with respect to anything else anybody else may have said to you, because that would be hearsay. But if there's something in the records that can form a basis for you to answer the question, I'll allow you to do that. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor. Based on the records that you reviewed and coming to your various opinions in this case, is there any evidence that the Ferriters were recommended those treatments that you just mentioned?
No.
Is there any evidence in the records that you reviewed that they were recommended inpatient treatment for attachment disorder?
No.
Is there any evidence in the record that the Ferriters were recommended to go to a specialist for attachment disorders?
No.
And just so we're clear, Ms. Murad, you're talking about the records that she reviewed,
Yes.
not in the record in the global sense of this proceeding.
Just the ones you have. Yes. All right. I want to go into, Your Honor, my next opinion does require me to approach. I'm wondering if it's a good time for a break.
Yeah, it is good because we've been going about an hour and a half this morning. So we'll take a break, 15-minute break. It's almost 10:30. We'll be in recess until 10:45.
All right, you've heard from the forensic psychologist what you could hear from the forensic psychologist, but there's always just a little bit more information that is necessary, and in this case, it has to do with reactive attachment disorder. What does it mean to deal with that? All right, so hang on, you guys. Stand by for just a minute. That pull up. Okay, what I'm going to do right now is take you to a video in regard to that subject, and this is coming courtesy of Court TV's Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan.
From the outside, they appear to be a very normal suburban family. Timothy and Tracy Ferriter, a mother and father, both working to provide the best lives for their 4 children, living in the affluent town of Jupiter, Florida, in a wonderful community. A nice large house with a 2-car garage. But only one car could fit inside because of what else was in that garage. An 8x8 wooden structure with a mattress, a camera, a desk, and a bucket. Investigators say this is where the Ferriters locked up their teenaged adopted son for hours at a time. Timothy Ferriter is now on trial for aggravated child abuse, but he says the structure in the garage was there to keep his family safe. His son suffers from reactive attachment disorder, and the Ferriters were afraid their son would act out violently and harm his siblings. Tonight, we take a look at this disorder as we investigate why this adopted boy was locked inside this structure in the garage by himself.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us, and our coverage continues tonight of the story and the trial that everyone is talking about and everyone is trying to figure out. The bottom line here, they put him in the box. You want to call it something different, you can. But it's 8x8, it's square. It doesn't have windows. There's no closet. It's a box. They put him in there, and that's a fact. That is the reason that we're having this trial. I mean, without that, there is no trial. There are no allegations here of abuse. Even if some of the other conduct in this case seems abusive, without the box, there's no case. That's the bottom line. And they put him in there. Specifically, the man on trial, Timothy Ferriter, did it, as did his wife, Tracy. So whether you want to call it a room, a structure, a box, whatever, they're the ones who put him in there. That is just a fact in the case. So now we get to the next part of it. Why? Why? Well, Timothy Ferriter is saying because my son was dangerous. That they're at their wits' end, fearful that their adopted son would act out and would harm members of the family, specifically the siblings and the younger siblings in the family. That's the reasoning that we're hearing and what we've heard, is that he was a problem. He was violent, he was out of control, and we didn't know what he was going to do at night. He's grabbing knives, he's harmed others in our home, and there are many more things that happen than what the jury in this particular case is hearing about. But this is the reason. This is the reason why Timothy Ferriter says that he put his son inside that 8x8 structure room box in the garage. Now, why? Next question is, well, why was his son dangerous? Well, apparently there's a diagnosis of this reactive attachment disorder. And that's something they were dealing with and trying to figure out, I guess. Or were they? That's one of the questions in the trial. So you've got a young man, now he's a teenager, who apparently has behavioral issues, and people are tying it back to this RAD, reactive attachment disorder. So that's a big issue in the case, as is the room itself. So if he's got this condition, he's got this disorder, and you've spoken to doctors, like, what else did you actually try to do? And I think for the jury, this is a huge issue. And for the Ferriters, it's the question I think everyone has. It's like, well, what did you really try to do before you landed on this solution? Because this wasn't the first box he was in. He was in a box in Arizona before they moved. So when they bought the new house, they bought a house with one less bedroom than they needed, and they built a, whatever you want to call it, in the garage with a lock from the outside. So there's several questions that I want to deal with tonight in this program. The first is understanding what this reactive attachment disorder is, how dangerous it can be, what are the symptoms, like what does a child do who suffers from this, how do they get it, and how do you treat it? And then what effect does putting a child who has this into that box every day have on the condition? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? And does the violence get worse because his reactive attachment disorder is getting worse because of the way he's being treated? So is it sort of snowballing and his behavior is getting worse and worse? That's what we're going to try to figure out tonight. Because a lot of those issues are the same things that the jury's going to be grappling with as they try to figure out if Timothy Ferriter, and then eventually his wife, when she goes to trial, committed a crime here. Or whether, as the defense said, it's just, parenting is tough. And they made some bad choices, they made some wrong choices, but they didn't have the criminal intent behind it all.
There we go. And I'm back on, and I wanna echo the one thing that that Vinnie Politan had said. The big question with this is, what else did you try? Now, if this boy was so dangerous to everybody else in the house, did you try anything else, or was the whole box the be all end all idea? That was the cure all for everything. Again, I don't see any reasonable explanation for this, especially putting him in the box for 16 to 18 hours at a time.
So let's begin by listening to a clinical and forensic psychologist who testified today. Now, as you listen to this testimony, remember, this is a witness called by the defense, meaning this is a witness called by the defense to help Timothy Ferriter in the eyes of this jury. So let's listen to Dr. Sheila Rappa talking about what this disorder is, and then talk about, well, how did the Ferriters deal with and handle their child who was suffering from this, and is that good or bad for the child? Take a listen.
Normally what we see is there's a cycle of attachment from the moment that child is born. So what we see in the cycle is a child that is born, and let's say that child is wet or soiled or hungry or cold. That child starts crying. Immediately an adult comes, a caretaker comes, picks up that child, takes care of that child, soothes that child. The child's then able to self-regulate, go back to sleep, or whatever they're doing. This cycle occurs thousands of times with parents. If you've ever had a newborn, you know it's constant. And if you're constantly going after that newborn every time they cry, soothing that newborn, helping that newborn then learns, I have someone I can trust, I have someone I can attach to, and I know that if I get out of control or I need something, there's an adult that's going to come along, and that adult is going to help me. Children that do not get this, there's an interruption in that attachment. So you can imagine all the things. They don't trust that anyone will ever take care of them. They don't trust that their needs will be met. They can't see the world from anyone else's perspective. So attachment is a huge thing. What we normally see, so normally you'll get a child that has a reactive attachment disorder. They come out of a very bad environment. They go into a home that's loving and kind and has stability and structure. We normally see that the child begins to get better. So the attachment disorder gets better. There are children who have what we call persistent reactive attachment disorder, where the damage was so severe in childhood that as they get older, we don't necessarily see that damage start to go away. if they're plugged into the right therapies and they know the right places to go, and some of them, have to go to higher levels of care, then we might see some sort of healing, but it's something that they will struggle with, for some of these kids, for their life. There are certain behaviors that are kind of indicative of a kid that has reactive attachment disorder. And it would include lying, frequent lying for no good reason, just lies that make no sense. It can be aggression, it can be violence, it can be being mean to animals, being mean to younger children, stealing, hoarding. Food is a big issue for children with reactive attachment disorder. So they gorge on food or they steal food. They're constantly food preoccupied. Some of them don't eat. So it really just depends on, how that is manifesting in each individual child. But it's a significant psychological disorder when you see the symptoms involved of children whose reactive attachment disorder did not get better just because they were put in a loving home.
It is your opinion that the way that they chose to manage the behaviors is probably the worst way anyone could ever manage these type of behaviors, correct?
That's correct.
Now, although you can't make a diagnosis, you think that there are indications that the child in this case has complex PTSD as well as an attachment disorder, right?
Yes.
And if a child does have an attachment disorder or complex PTSD, the way the defendant acted towards the victim is the complete opposite of what anyone should have done with a child with one of those conditions, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, confining and isolating a child can exacerbate those disorders, correct?
That's right.
And so exacerbate means make those symptoms worse.
Yes.
Correct. The type of treatment, the way that he was kept and confined, correct?
Oh, yes.
Would it also, and isn't it true that it's your opinion that it will also make the child feel rejected, correct?
Yes, it could.
It make the child feel like they're not good enough, correct?
Yes, it could.
It make the child feel like they are inherently bad, correct?
Yes, it could.
It can lead the child to maneuver or manipulate through a situation to avoid that isolation.
Yes, it could.
It can lead to depression, correct?
Yes.
It can lead to suicidal ideation, correct?
It could.
When a punishment is chronic, meaning that it happens on an ongoing basis, you will see a bigger impact too, correct?
For sure.
And as to the victim in this case specifically, you think that what was going on with him, the issues that he was having prior, was really exacerbated by how his parents acted towards them, correct?
Yes, that's my belief.
There is a psychological impact, a negative one, when punishment is humiliating and isolating, correct?
Yes.
Again, that's a witness who's called by the defense. Again, the defense will come back and say, well, yeah, we told you in the beginning of the case that they're bad parents, that he made a bad choice here. And it was the wrong choice, but it wasn't criminal. Let's dive a little deeper into all of this tonight. Joining us tonight in North Carolina, reactive attachment disorder parent, advocate, and author, Kerry Williams is with us. There's a picture of her book, Reactive Attachment Disorder. In New York, practicing psychologist and attorney, Dr. Gene Cirillo. In Orlando, Florida, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. And in St. Louis, Missouri, licensed mental health and nationally certified clinician, Sharonda Brown. Welcome to you all. Dr. Gene Cirillo, I want to begin with you on this issue of this reactive attachment disorder. How dangerous can a child who has this become? How bad can it get? And the reason I'm asking you is I'm getting, I wouldn't say bombarded, but I've got a handful of people on social media reaching out and saying, listen, you guys don't know what it's like. We had a family member, I had a son, I had a daughter with this, and you guys just don't know what it's like. How bad and dangerous can someone who's suffering from this be inside of a family?
He can murder somebody, he can wind up in prison, but if he doesn't get the appropriate treatment, that's much more likely to happen. This reactive attachment disorder begins in the first 3 years of life. His needs were not met, and they're still not being met. He's in solitary confinement, worse than any prisoner. That's the worst punishment usually in a prison. You wouldn't treat a dog that way. They were depriving him of air conditioning. They weren't letting him use the toilet. What is the purpose except to make him feel like an animal? And then it's not so much his fault anymore if he behaves like an animal. He needs therapy. He needs help. And if he's part of the family needs family therapy as well as him getting individual help.
I couldn't have said that any better myself. I mean, sure, he's done his fair share of bad things, but at the same time, how are you treating it? Putting him in the box is just making the bad situation worse. Keeping him in there for 16 to 18 hours at a time is just making the situation worse. What are you really doing for this kid? That's like a prisoner being put in solitary confinement. He's in a cell all by himself. No human contact. At least you have better amenities. You have better amenities for a prisoner than the Ferriters had for RF. At least the prison guard isn't gonna make you dump out your own bucket so the neighbors can't see you. But there's a lot more that goes with this.
That's a great point, and that's another part of this entire equation. All right, Kerry Williams, your thoughts about, so this is a family who, again, is claiming we're at our wits' end. We're at our wits' end. This is really dangerous. We're concerned about the siblings, especially the young children. He's collecting knives. He's been violent. He hit somebody with a door who was pregnant. He has hurt someone else's shoulder. He's grabbed classmates by the throat. We believe this is a child out of control. This is how we controlled the situation.
Well, obviously they made the wrong choice. This is obviously a kid who has serious enough behavior that they need to be in residential treatment for this help. I think what we need to realize is that reactive attachment disorder is really too big for families to manage in the home, especially if their children are on the extreme end of the spectrum, like my son was. And those children do need to be in residential treatment where they can actually be cared for properly and they can be kept safe. And as far as siblings go, that's something I'm actually very passionate about. I think we don't talk about that enough. When we look at what care is best for a child who has reactive attachment disorder, we really need to not just look at what's best for them, but what's best for their siblings.
Dr. Janie Lacey, as you look at this situation, right? Choices are being made. Now, this is a choice that they made prior to moving to Florida. Like they did this in Arizona, then they moved to Florida, bought a new house, and then built another. This is the second time they've done this. They did it to them in Arizona as well. What are your thoughts about where this child was in terms of if this is his day-to-day life, and everything we're hearing, this is making him worse. I'm trying to get to like that chicken and the egg. Does your gut tell you that the level of danger that they're describing got worse? Because of the treatment? Because of what they did when he was in Arizona before they even got to Florida?
So, Vinny, we would want to consider all of that. Like, as I just heard my colleague mention, when I worked with children in my career that had reactive attachment disorder, it was because their families were getting help. And when we look at the family responsiveness, the parent training, we're looking at their individual therapy. When we help families, we help people like Carrie and other families strengthen the relationship and having positive interactions consistently over time. And we know when we do these types of things and creating that stable and nurturing environment, it helps the child create that safety and that love and all the things that they need. So when we look at how these parents, or what we know what these parents did by this isolation and all of the things that this particular young man had to go through, of course it's going to cause more trauma. Of course it's going to exasperate the situation. It did not help. It just made things worse. So we can look at reactive attachment disorder in and of itself, and depending on the person who is evaluating it, can almost put the blame on the child. But we have to look at the resources the parents had. When did they get the diagnosis for their child, and what did they do? Because we know that there is help, consistent help, and it's a long-term process. And them just taking it in their hands and doing it by themselves, we knew was not the right choice, and just made things a lot worse.
Well, speaking of choices, when they bought the house, they chose the house specifically that they did. Has a 2-car garage. You can only fit 1 car in it. They hired a man named Jacques, who I spoke to on this program, who is the one who actually built this structure in the garage. Let's take a listen to what he told us.
He said, listen, I live in Arizona. I have an office in my garage, and I just bought a house in Jupiter, Florida, that we are very close to move in, and I want to build the same exact office in the garage in the house in Jupiter, Florida. I said, okay. He knew exactly what he wants. He said, build me a box. He has a two-car garage, which is 16 feet long, and he asked me to build a box basically on 8 feet on 8 feet, and he asked me on top of that to build a ceiling for that box under the existing ceiling with a space of 2 feet, so when they open the garage door, she can slide between the 2 ceilings. He asked me to add a deadlock to the door. And I said, okay, I don't know what. You have important things to keep in this office. So it wasn't look strange to me. So I went to the Home Depot and I bought the deadlock, and I installed it on top of the handle lock. And then I picture it for him, as you can see in the picture I send you. And then he asked me to reverse the locks. That means that the knobs of the locks will be outside of that office, and the key hole will be inside that office.
All right, Sharonda Brown. So a couple of things from this. Number one, now I know why I keep calling it a box, because the man who built it was told to build a box, and that's what he did. Number two, put the lock on the outside. But Sharonda, what's really telling to me is that the man who is building it is told it's an office. To me, that tells me that Timothy Ferriter knew this was not what I should be doing. I should not be building a box in my garage for my son. That's not right. And I'm going to tell the man who's building it, it's just a box for my office.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like he knew, and he was intentional about the abuse that he wanted to inflict on this child. And a lot of times when people know that they're going to be abused, they can be quite manipulative in their efforts. And this is how they protect their own shame and guilt. So in his mind, if he's saying, hey, I'm building an office, he doesn't have to deal with the fact that I am building an isolation space for my child, who I should be getting help for, but I'm choosing not to. So he tells himself, oh, it's office. I think a lot of times parents who are, intentionally abusive, they have to, sleep at night. And so what better way than to tell themselves that they are, doing something good for the child. with children who have reactive attachment disorder, there is so much help. There's so much that people can do to improve this, including the family therapy. I would definitely question the diagnosis, though, because if they were saying that they researched this and they evaluate him at 8, and he only had 3 sessions per clinician, so that's 6 sessions total, which would make me wonder how much did they put into evaluating what was really going on with this kid, and if he's been evaluated since then. And if so, do they consider the amount of abuse that he's had to endure since being in care? It's almost like, you know, a child can't walk. So you say, hey, I'm going to throw you in the ocean so you can learn how to swim and walk back to me. That creates more trauma. That creates almost a near-death experience for a child to have to go into a situation where they already don't trust anyone, and now they're encouraged to not trust even more. So I would just say that it's very possible. I'm not going to say it's possible. I will say it's likely that he knew that he was putting his child in a very dangerous situation. That he couldn't even call it a bedroom. He wouldn't even say.
Now I pause what this expert is saying, because not only is she right, but I want you guys to put yourself in this position. You're a foster child. You've had your moments. But you also know the one thing you're in dire need of. Your foster parents, on the other hand, they're giving you everything but that. They're subjecting you to be put inside of an 8x8 prison as for your punishment. You're told constantly you can't touch the air conditioner or you're going to get in trouble. You have the bucket in this thing for your bathroom. When they let you out in the morning, you got to clean it, and so the neighbors don't see you doing it. And you are just being abused left, right, and center. When all you really need, the love and the care that a parent is supposed to give you, whether you're a foster parent, adoptive parent, whether they're a foster parent, adoptive parent, or natural parent. And even if you are a quote-unquote problem child, are they doing the best for you, or are they just doing what they think is best for them? Think about that.
I'm building a bedroom for my son. He says, I'm building an office.
It's a box. Okay, our guests are staying with us. A lot more to talk about in this case. And up next, we're going to talk about some of the alleged verbal abuse. What impact does that have on a child who is suffering from this disorder? Plus, coming up next hour.
In Palm Beach County, Florida, the boy in the box trial, Timothy Ferriter,
trying to abuse and hurt. They're into a let's contain and monitor and make sure that nothing's going to happen.
What's going on in this house?
The Boy in a Box trial. Live coverage weekday mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Reacting to a child who has complex PTSD or an attachment disorder with things like anger, and threats is not productive or helpful to a child with those conditions, correct?
Right.
And those reactions create a psychological harm to the child, correct?
Yes, and it can exacerbate problems that were already there, for sure.
Adding to the existing harm.
Yes.
Making it worse.
That's another part of this case, which is the treatment and the tone. And I think that's something that has caught a lot of people's attention who've been following this case. Now, we don't get to see the video. The jury does, because it has the minor, the adopted son, in the video, so that can't be broadcast on television. The jury gets to see it, but we get to hear it. So let's take a listen. This is Timothy and Tracy Ferriter and their adopted son, and it's all about chocolate.
Tell me something? What? Don't tell me what. This is your one chance. Don't look at me like you want to tell me something or not?
I have a nightmare.
Yeah, from where?
Blue van.
Where?
Green van.
Excuse me?
Green van.
Stealing again?
What the fuck wrong with you?
You're stealing
Disappointing.
chocolate? And there's you got so much stuff in your
You're just such a disappointment. You're going to lose. I'm going to take you out of that school. And you're going to be in this room.
He's going to be...
You're this close. Because I can't trust with you. But put the ankle bracelet back on. And then you can try to run away if you want and do all the you do.
Why
But I'm going to lock you up.
Because those are for my foot.
Give me
Why are you a little sick?
I'm sick of the bull. You're a big boy, you're going to steal, you're going to talk to the police. I'm going to give you a deal, okay? You're going to steal from my house, you'll be done with school. You'll be in here homeschooling. I told you that's a possibility. So go ahead and test me tomorrow by going to school and misbehaving or doing you shouldn't do. Test me.
Let's bring back in our guests, Kerry Williams, RAD, parent advocate. What do you think about this whole situation here? Now they've got their child, and apparently he's taken some chocolate, and this is the reaction. What are you seeing, or what are you hearing in all of this?
Well, I think that a lot of kids with RAD have food issues. They have issues a lot of times with hoarding. That's very common, what they're talking about. Obviously, they're overreacting to that situation. I mean, that's very clear. But I think that what's missing in the conversation here is that we need to look at how they got to this point. I would not jump to the conclusion that they're choosing to abuse their child or that they're choosing to not get help. I think it's very important to recognize that when parents talk to therapists, teachers, police officers, friends, and family about this situation, they are not believed. Because what they're explaining for the behaviors of their child are so extreme that the person they're explaining it to cannot even imagine that it is true. And moms in particular are blamed and shamed when they try to get help. So what I'd like to understand for this family is, you know, what did they try to do and how did they get to this point?
Dr. Janie Tracy, your thoughts about what we just heard and the impact of that?
Well, with a teen that probably has already struggling with, I imagine emotional regulation, especially if the diagnosis is truly there. And then you're adding in their verbal abuse of what we're hearing. We heard the insult, heard the humiliation and him trying to intimidate him from that place of frustration. And absolutely, we understand that parents can be frustrated and they probably got to this place after consistent interactions. But we know that whatever their son was going through, that this type of approach can intensify his struggles. And it's going to reinforce his sense of being unsafe and almost being unworthy when you were kind of hearing some of the language and the verbiage that his dad was using towards him. So that's going to probably, if it hadn't, at that moment would have led to some type of withdrawal or more erratic behavior, which would then just kind of keep the system going of his interactions with his parents in particular.
Sharonda Brown, I want you to take a listen to a little bit more. This is Tim Ferriter. Again, another one of these recordings, and it's about the air conditioning.
Did you turn the air on in your room?
Yes.
You're supposed to touch that? Did you hear Baba?
Yes.
Did you hear his question?
No.
Are you supposed to touch air conditioning?
No.
Why did you touch it?
It was getting hot.
I don't give a if it's getting hot. You're a tough guy. You don't touch the air conditioning. I'll deal with you tomorrow on that.
All right, Sharonda, what are you hearing here?
I think that there's 3 responses to trauma, and let's keep in mind that RAD is a trauma and stress disorder in and of itself, right? So there's 3 responses. Kids will either fight through it, fawn through it, or they will flight through it. And so fight is when you kind of go to the motion of the conflict. Fight, obviously, you run from it. And fawn, you learn how to navigate, how to deal. It sounds like not only did this kid want to attach to these parents, but he almost began to identify with the father in a sense of, I'm going to be just as abusive as you are because I need you here, I need you in my face, and I want to manage, this type of control in the best way that I can. So when you hear the stealing or the cutting on the air when you know you're not supposed to, those are all responses to control. When people are stealing or when they're going to do manipulative things, it is a form of control. So it sounds like he was trying to identify with his abuser. And a lot of children would do that too. When they want to still be close to the parent who is abusing them, they will identify with them. And I think what I'm hearing is this child wanted some sort of attention. And like we talked about before, kids would rather take negative over none. And it sounds like he was fine with, yep, I turned on the air, come down here, come get me, come talk to me. So he wanted to challenge his abuser just as much as his abuser kept challenging him. And that's what I hear with chocolate and the air.
Dr. Jean Cirillo, where is that line in these situations, which are tense, which are intense, between, purposeful abuse, almost to a level of being sadistic, versus frustration, That's the line I'm looking at here.
That it's tough love here. Somebody told them you have to be strict and you have to get the child to toe the line, and they're doing the right thing with the wrong child. I mean, something like air conditioning in Jupiter, Florida. Anybody should have air conditioning. At this point, it's abuse to make him turn it off. The chocolate might be for attention, or it might be that he's hoarding food, as my other colleagues said. But the point is that kids learn to do or behave like his father.
Kerry Williams, where do you see that line between parental frustration and child abuse?
Well, certainly, I think that, using the F word with your child is abusive. I think that what happens is RAD does cause extreme frustration in parents, as everyone is saying. And I think that the issue is we have to get to these families before they're in crisis. Because once you get to this point this family's at, it's really way too late, right? We need to get to them years before this, when that family is still coping, when the family has the ability to therapeutically parent and the ability to do all of these things. But a lot of parents who have kids with RAD, particularly mothers, end up diagnosed with PTSD from it. They have depression, they have anxiety, because it is beyond their limits to
Guys, give me just a moment. All right. That's a little. That's a quick little technical issue. Everything is straightened out now. We are about to go to the point where we may hear the defendant testify or not. Honestly, I wouldn't want to hear. I wouldn't want, if I was a defense attorney, I would not try to put Tim Ferriter on the witness stand myself.
Up you got?
I do.
All right, you can put your hand down, sir. Go ahead and state your name and date of birth, please.
Tim Ferriter, 4/17/75.
All right, and you read, write, and understand English, sir?
I do.
And what's your highest level of education?
College degree.
All right, are you under the influence of any drugs, alcohol, or other medications this morning?
I'm not.
Have you ever been treated for any mental or emotional condition?
I have not.
All right, and just to give you the context of why I'm conducting this colloquy, as you've heard, your attorneys advised me that you've made a decision whether to testify or not. And so, as I mentioned yesterday, I I need to make sure that that decision is being made by you knowingly and intelligently, freely and voluntarily. So that's where these questions are intended to go to put me in a position where I can make a factual finding on those items. You understand all that, sir?
I do.
All right, and, you're represented by your attorneys, Ms. Murad and Mr. Waheed in this matter?
Yes, sir.
And are you satisfied with their services?
I am.
All right, and have they done everything that you've asked them to do regarding the presentation of your trial and consideration of whether for you to testify on your own behalf or not?
They have.
All right, and have you had a full opportunity to discuss with your attorneys the pros and the cons and the risk and the consequences of testifying versus not testifying in this matter?
I have.
All right. And have they fully advised you of all those risks and consequences as far as you're aware of?
They have.
And have they been able to answer all of your questions regarding the various pros and cons, risk and consequences of testifying or not?
They have.
All right. Has anybody, including your attorneys, made any promises, threats, or tried to force you into a decision this morning that would be against your will?
No.
All right, so the reason I ask that is, and you've heard some of this from me before, there are basically three things that a defendant absolutely controls in a criminal proceeding. And what I mean by that is, although you can receive the advice and counsel of your attorneys, ultimately I don't look to your attorneys to tell me what the decision is. I look to you to tell me what your decision is, because your decision is what governs. Those three things are: one, whether to plead guilty or not guilty; two, whether to go to trial or not go to trial; and three, whether once you are in trial, whether to testify on your own behalf or not. Obviously, you've already made and gone past two of those decision points, continuing with your plea of not guilty and also continuing with the decision to have a trial. So now we're at that precipice where I told you we would arrive at one day, once the trial were to begin, as to whether you should make a decision to testify on your own behalf or not. There are certain consequences that stand there and you subject yourself to direct examination by your attorneys, then that opens you up to cross-examination by the state. You understand that?
I do.
All right. Another area is that, do you have any felony convictions or misdemeanor convictions involving truth or dishonesty? They could also bring that out. Now, does the state have anything like that that it would potentially bring out against Mr. Ferriter if he were to testify? All right, so that's not a real worry. It's a worry for a lot of defendants that come before me, but it's not a worry in your case because you have no history. So the real risk is that you're opening up yourself to cross-examination by the state. Based on the colloquy that I've given you thus far, do you have any questions of the state of the court about anything I've discussed or explained to you this morning? All right, after this colloquy, do you feel like you need to take any additional time to speak with your attorneys regarding the decision that I'm going to ask you to tell me in just a moment?
No, thank you.
All right. Have you made a decision in this case whether to testify on your own behalf?
I have.
All right. And what is that decision, Mr. Ferriter?
To not testify.
All right. Based on the court's colloquy of Mr. Ferriter, sir, I find that you're making the decision knowingly and intelligently after having had the opportunity to receive the advice and counsel of your attorney. I also find that I've explained to you the potential risk and consequences of testifying in your own behalf on the stand, including the fact that you would subject yourself to cross-examination. Based on all that, I find that you're also entering into this decision with an appreciation of those risks and consequences, and that you understand the same, and that your decision is being made freely and voluntarily. So I accept your decision not to testify as having been knowingly and intelligently, freely and voluntarily made by you. So that concludes the colloquy on this matter. Sir, you may give your attorney back to Mike, and thank you, sir.
Okay. What we're going to do next, we're going to before we get to the verdict. Only because I know going through all the closing arguments from both the prosecution and the defense is going to take a little bit of time, and I don't want to waste yours. So what I'm going to do is go to a subject that everybody's been talking about throughout this case, and that's the body language of Tim Ferriter. So I'm gonna bring that to you, and I want to get your opinions on it all.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. This is going to be a fascinating hour as we take a look at the boy in the box trial case that we are covering. And we're going to look at it in a couple ways that we haven't done before. And I want to begin by talking about Timothy Ferriter, the defendant, the father on the stand. This guy has been stoic inside the courtroom. I mean, look at the picture we're looking at there. I mean, he about 98% of the time, that's kind of how he looks. And, you know, when you're accused of a crime and you're in a courtroom, you know the jury's watching, etc. Defense attorneys try to tell you not to show anything. And it's been difficult for me personally to read this guy, to understand this guy. Now, the jury in the same room with him may have a little bit of a different take. There may be little things that he's doing. I don't know. But it's been tough because you don't get to see any sort of reaction or emotion or anything from him. It's that look, you know, the perfectly gelled hair, the suit, and just that look that he has in the courtroom. The most stoic of any defendant in recent times here on Court TV. Now, the other thing that sort of adds to all of that is that he chose and remained silent. Now, of course, you're allowed to do that. We understand that at Court TV. You understand that at home. I mean, it's part of our constitutional rights. We have the right to remain silent. We don't have to prove a thing if we're accused of a crime. He's been accused of a crime, doesn't have to prove anything. It's up to state to prove everything beyond any and all reasonable doubt, every element of every crime that he's been charged with. But his silence, when you combine that with his stoic presence in the courtroom, doesn't give you an indication of who this guy is. Like, who is he? Who is Timothy Ferriter? What is this guy really like? We know what he's like in moments on the video with his son. The jury gets to see it. We get to hear it. Not great moments. The defense played other moments that they thought were more normal, but you don't get the true, what hasn't come through to me, and through his silence, I think it added to that, is that I feel like he's almost not humanized. Like, he cold, distant, and not like a real person. And again, it's nothing that he has to prove. It's nothing that he's compelled to say. It's about and I was surprised that he chose to remain silent. So he remains silent. He's stoic in the court. But what is his body language saying in all of this? Both his reactions to testimony in the courtroom and things that are being played for the jury. Is there any little indicator there that tells us how this is making him feel? You know, the slightest movement, because I haven't been able to pick that up. That's why we've got an expert coming in tonight. Also going to take a listen to his voice when he does speak and he does yell at his son. What does that indicate? Does it indicate a place of where that's coming from? Because to me, again, that's what this case is all about. The other part is, and this is real, when a jury is judging someone, you know, do they like him? Right? In the Johnny Depp case, great example. The jury didn't like Amber Heard, but they liked Johnny Depp. And that was really a result of who they were inside the courtroom. And some of the recordings, obviously, as well. But it's really who they were in the courtroom, day in and day out. He hasn't exposed himself to that, and he chose not to testify. Again, his choice, his right. But will this jury like him? And who is Timothy Ferriter? Let's see what we can figure out through the body language. Joining us tonight in Alexandria, Virginia, body language expert, New York Times best-selling author of You Can't Lie to Me, Janine Driver is with us. Janine, great to see you tonight. This is like a difficult
real frank to you. This language is not used out there in front of the baby and the girls. But you're a tough guy, right? You're gonna break. Let me break. Right? I don't give a. Let's break. Let's break all this. I don't need it. Let's rip it off the wall. So let's talk tough guy, huh? Let's talk. Let's get real here. I don't need this though. I got stuff that I got to do in my life to pay for your food and your housing and your clothes and your sisters and your brother, that I don't need your extra that you're just asking for attention for. When you got a lot of gifts that you have that other people don't have, and you on them, and you're mad because thinks I'm doing something. Hell yeah!
All right, Janine, there's two parts to this, right? There's his voice in the recording, and then there's him sitting in the courtroom. Tell me what you saw.
Well, of course, he's trying to intimidate. I don't think you need to be a body language expert to hear that with that raised tone and pitch of voice. Voice is really important. I think we'll talk about that quite a bit tonight. What I want to talk about here is early on in this particular clip, Vinny, and you at home, we see Tim look down left. Down left is either in one of two things, depends if he's right-handed or left-handed. It's either internal dialogue where he's having a conversation with himself, or it's deep emotion and he's processing that emotion. Not only in this clip, but in other clips, if you're watching this case, you're going to see Tim occasionally do this. He pulls his mouth back just really subtly for a micro expression of fear. And you may not see fear like we traditionally might see fear, like really big and pulled back, but this subtle fear, what's happening is he's sucking in air, I believe, in the corners of his mouth. And this is a major, major reliable indicator of concern, anxiety, and fear. And so he thinks he's not giving it away, but you'll see him. There's another clip where he talks, the mother is talking about stealing candy. I don't know if we're getting into that, but you again in court, we see Tim do this little grimace. That grimace is a micro expression of fear in a 15th of a second. You can't not see it once you know what to look for. And then in the auditory that we're hearing in the audio, that increase in tone and pitch of voice, that is actually a way to get attention, and it does not serve us well when reducing conflict with people. A hostage negotiator, Jim Kavanaugh, my hostage negotiator mentor, didn't scream and yell at David Koresh told him how to deal with conflict. I always say, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? Clearly in this situation, he's looking to be right, but clearly not effective. If it was effective, then this would have been the end of it, and there would have been no other problems with his son, right, with listening. There's a lot happening here, even though it might not seem like there is.
So when you say you see expressions of fear, so he's hearing this, do you think the fear is, oh my goodness, this does not sound good, this is really bad news for me?
Hey, well, this is the deal, Vinny, and you at home. We don't know what the catalyst is. We can spot these micro expressions: happiness, sadness, fear, surprise, anger, contempt, and disgust. Quite frankly, I'm looking for contempt, and I haven't seen it yet in the clip that you've shown me. But without a doubt, it's a couple things, right? It's either, boy, doesn't sound good. It could be that. It could also be, I'm going to end up in jail. I mean, he's up for what, 40 years, Vinny? So he didn't take the plea deal. And so we don't know what's inside of his head, but for sure we can spot the fear, tiny micro expression, and when those happen, they're trying to mask them. And here's the special thing: body language shows up to 5 seconds before thought. So we know he's scared before his brain knows he's scared. So there's that 5 second delay. That's why it's so critical for us to decode body language, because we get a 5 second advantage. Think about the military or athletes. Does 5 seconds make a difference? Yes.
Big difference. Big
here,
difference.
there's fear. There is fear.
Okay, let's move to Tracy Ferriter, because she's there as well inside the courtroom. She's been watching the trial in the gallery. She's going to have her own trial after this. Here she is listening to, again, another one of these Ring camera recordings. Let's watch.
What do you need? Do you have pajamas? Are those them right there? Do you hear me? Oh, here we go. Back to this where you can't talk. You're a middle school boy. You want to do all these things. You want to do tests. You want to do things. But you can't talk because you got caught being dishonest. Okay. Well, that's fine. Guess I'll just keep giving you more chances. Every day, new chance for even though doesn't care, he doesn't want to be nice to anyone. Oh, let's let do this. Oh, let's let me bring some food because I think he's gonna have a good night. Oh, let me do everything for okay. Oh, can't talk because he got in trouble because he got caught. It's like, give me a break. Start owning up to what you're doing, and then try to fix the problem, like we keep telling you.
Janine, the only thing I'm seeing a lot of eye blinks. I don't know if it was an extraordinary number of them, but what did you see?
Well, the blink rate is 3 times the normal rate that we're seeing here, which indicates a spike in stress and anxiety. And something's happening here. We're seeing dimpling of her chin. And when we see this, Elizabeth Holmes did this too. I don't know if you remember this interview. Elizabeth Holmes, who's now, I think she's in jail as well, for scamming the public on a blood test that could test multiple diseases. Elizabeth Holmes was once asked, tell me a secret you're keeping. And she thought 9 seconds and then said, I don't have many secrets. Of course, she had the biggest secret of all, but that dimpling of the chin, we see that here in trial on the face, the corners of the mouth are down. This is sadness. The interesting thing is I always look at the forehead. It's an accurate indicator of stress and anxiety. And we're seeing these what are called Einstein lines across the forehead. This indicates she knows a lot of information about different topics. And those are popping up. Normally, if I wanted to code those, and I've done this with you before, Vinny. I know you have three real deep Einstein lines. So right here, I have to ask someone to do that. But we have that happening at play here. What does this indicate? This indicates she is sad and stressed right out of the gate here in this clip. And you can see that. And it's interesting, if you look at her left eyebrow, our left hand, if you think about our left hand is where you put your wedding ring, the left hand is your personal side. And here on her personal side, she has this like crooked eyebrow a little bit. It comes up and it's angled. These are people that in her personal life, what's in it for me? What's the angle? So right here, when we're going back into the recording that she's hearing, this is all about her. This is all about her, not the way to handle conflict. Forget about the box itself, but how we talk to our children. You know, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? I like to say, I did a TED talk on this, how to think like a hostage negotiator to get what you want. So paying attention to the language we're using if you want to get better results. And she, by the way, and I don't know if we have this clip, she uses such language as you stole, why would you steal the chocolate, steal. In law enforcement, here as a parent, she's not using any minimizing language. She's just going for the jugular. And this poor kid, man, doesn't have a chance. You know, she's doing the circle. When we hear this figure 8, the same stuff that's being said over and over and over again, that's high stress and anxiety. So even in the moment of her confronting her adopted son, she's under that stress and out of control.
Let's take a listen. You mentioned the teenage boy. We have some of his testimony. Here he is describing the box and being in the box. He testified, again, we can't show him, but we can clearly hear his voice. He's in the room testifying where his parents are.
To me, being locked in a room, it's dehumanizing. It's almost as bad as genocide. It's saddening to abuse a child that was just acting like a child, never thinking of what an adult would think to do to a child that would succumb his or her efforts in daily life to succeed, suffering from emotional pain, suffering, trauma,
All right, how about his voice and Timothy Ferriter's reaction?
Well, Timothy, let's start there. He opens his mouth and takes a breath in right there. That's to reduce that stress that's happening for him in that moment. He also looks away. And again, it depends on if he's right-handed or left-handed. He either goes emotional or self-talk. But I want you to notice, if you just saw just a second ago, he's nodding his head yes here. And it's very, very subtle. You can begin to notice these things. Is a head nod in a direction, is that a solid indicator? For me, not so much, but nevertheless, we're putting all these indicators, especially when we don't have a lot of low-hanging fruit here to analyze Timothy. So we do see that, though, nodding yes going along. We saw this with Roger Clemens when Roger Clemens was asked by Mike Wallace, hey, did you ever cheat in the game of baseball? Did you take steroids? Because, Brian McNamee said this, and well, this is being retold, not recanted, to Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens is doing these subtle head nods, yes, and we see that here with Tim Ferriter. Now, as for the son, boy, he is articulate. This young man, for what he's gone through, is really quite extraordinary. How he's able to articulate. He's demonstrating emotional intelligence to say, hey, how about have some empathy? Put yourself in my shoes here. I think that he's for me, very impressive. And if he ever wants to take any of my training, he can have a scholarship to anything he wants, because my heart goes out to him. This father reminds me, do you remember RoboCop or whatever with Arnold Schwarzenegger? It was like the cop that was like the robot that was like really, like serious. Like that's this aspect.
That's Timothy Ferriter. That is.
Yeah, that's Timmy.
Court has been advised that the jury has reached a verdict. Are all sides ready to proceed? All right, Mark, you may bring the jurors out. All rise.
Jury entering.
All right, everyone may be seated. All right, members of the jury, has the jury selected a just tell me yes or no as the jury reached a verdict. All right, if you could please hand the verdict to my courtroom deputy. Madam Clerk, please publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 15th Judicial Circuit, Criminal Division.
Hey guys, this is the Last Outlaw, saying thank you to all who have watched and subscribed to Bethea'S Byte Reloaded, your true crime and drama-free destination. I couldn't do this without you. Did you enjoy this video? Are you looking to get more information about what you have seen and heard here? Are you looking to give feedback as to how I can present this better? Here's what you do. Like this video. The more eyes on it, the more this information gets spread to others, which makes it a step closer to justice served. Share this to your social media. Again, with more eyes on this, the closer we get to seeing justice served. Drop me a comment. Whether it's on the topic or the presentation, I will respond to your theories and ideas. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button to show your support for this little true crime engine, powered by you. Set your notifications to all for future videos. Be sure to follow Bethea'S Byte Reloaded all over social media. At Bethea'S Byte Reloaded True Crime on Facebook. At EKB316 on X, formerly known as Twitter. At Bethea'S Byte Reloaded on YouTube. At EKB316 on Instagram. At King of Hearts 316 2021 on TikTok. You can email me at kingofhearts316_09 at outlook.com. This is your home for news without the drama, your opinions, lively debates, your voice heard, and above all else, justice served. This is Bethea'S Byte, and it's reloaded.